Hello and welcome back to the Villa View for another player season review. We did the goalkeepers a few days ago, so now it's time to dissect what happened with our defenders this season. So first up, Dan, right back, then we go to centre back and then across to left back. At right back, Dan, this season we've had three players playing there: Richie Delat, Alan Hutton and James Bree. Start with Delat. Really can't say too much about him. A bit like Jed Steer, we expected him to make a big impact. Lots of experience in this league, winning the league with both Leicester and Middlesbrough. Yet this season we've seen nothing of him because of how unfortunate it was with that injury against Brentford.
Yeah, he looked reasonably solid in the few games that he did play. Obviously, he's got championship pedigree because he's got promoted with Leicester and Middlesbrough the season before, the one just gone. So I think he would have made an impact, and I think he would have been the number one right back. And I think at some point you would have seen Alan Hutton move on, but unfortunately for Delat, he's ended up injured. But he didn't do anything wrong when he played, and I think he's someone that hopefully we'll see something of next season, but I'm just not sure where, because I think Hutton and Bree have now got the monopoly on right back. He could possibly do a job as a fourth centre half, and I've heard he can play left back as well, but he's one I maybe see leaving because I don't see where he's going to fit in now, other than perhaps as the spare man, the Mika Richards role on the bench, a lot cheaper.
Next up, Dan, a guy that I'd describe as having a season of two halves. I'll give you one guess of who it is.
Matt Lynch.
Yeah, definitely. Alan Hutton, Dan. The first half of the season, when he had his chance, wasn't great. Second half of the season, I don't know what happened to him.
New man. Tell you what, since James Bree arrived, that man took it up, not even a notch, he took it up about 25 notches. I didn't think that he was capable of putting in the performances that he did from February onwards, and fair play to him. I hold my hands up. Obviously I did a big long apology video. He proved me wrong, made me look very, very silly, because by the end of the season he's probably ended it as one of our top 5 performers through the season, which tells you how good he was in the second half of the season, because I didn't think he was up to much in the first half of the season. I think he carried on his form from last disastrous season into this one, but yeah, the arrival of Bree seemed to really give him a kick up the backside, and I can't praise him enough for what he did from February onwards, because at times he was genuinely looked a world beater.
Well, he got called the Scottish Cafe a few times. Earned himself a contract extension as well because of his performances through the clauses. I don't know what happened to him, because he went from this guy that would run 10 yards and lose the ball to a guy that looked like he was basically playing right wing as well as right back.
Genuinely, at times over the previous season and a half, I wouldn't have trusted him to have put his boots on the right feet, but he honestly has made me look absolutely ridiculous. So fair play to him. If I ever did see him, I'd shake his hand and apologise, because obviously I've already apologised, but he deserves my apology. I was wrong.
Next up, Dan, is a player that featured on the obviously January list of players that we ranked and reviewed, James Bree. I still don't think he's made enough of an impact, but for me, he's shown real glimpses of what he can produce. Brighton last game of the season in particular, I was quite impressed with him. And for me, I think he will be first choice right back next season, or so I hope anyway.
I don't think he'll start the season as first choice right back. I think the Scottish Cafe will have that. And I was impressed with him against Brighton. I thought he had a good game. He made some good defensive contributions, and he looked quite tidy and quite alert. I thought he is the future, and he's obviously got something to bang, because I don't think we were the only team that were in for him. I think his biggest problem has been, I think he picked up a couple of knocks, and in that time Alan Hutton did what he did, so he can't really have any complaints with being on the bench, but he'll push Hutton hard for that right back slot next season, and I'm excited to see what he can do. I don't feel I've seen enough of him to properly judge him, but what I have seen, I think he had a bit of a nightmare against Fulham, but I think that was due to our system more than anything. Fulham away, I think we were playing against one of the sides that has the most width, and the full-backs and wingers were up against one wing-back, and I think Bree struggled, but I think anyone would have struggled in that game, especially when we went down to 10 men. So I'm positive about the future for him, and I want to see more of him.
I do, yeah. I think that's a fair reflection of him as well. We'll shift on to the centre-backs now, with the first signing of the summer last summer, Tommy Elphick.
Underwhelming, really. I really thought when we signed him, I had such high expectations. In the first few games, I thought, right, we've got ourselves a proper leader here. We've got someone that understands the Championship. Again, someone that's been promoted, but somewhere along the line, I think probably that Newcastle home game when he scored the own goal, he just wasn't the same. After that, he looked a bag of nerves, and I think sometimes the pressure of playing for Aston Villa, a genuinely big club in England, can get to players. And I think Elphick struggled with the expectation. I think we were going through a bad patch, and I don't think he stood up to be counted, which is unfortunate because I think he's a good character. And Steve Bruce has talked about him being a good character, and I don't think he's a bad footballer either. I think it's just one of those moves that hasn't worked out for whatever reason, and I'd be surprised if he was here next season at this stage of his career, because I don't think he'll want to sit around and be a third, fourth choice centre-back, and that's fair enough to him, really.
Yeah, I can't see him sticking around, sadly, because for me, he's a leader still, and confidence did hit him really hard. And he never really recovered from the game where he scored the own goal. Start of the season, I thought, yes, he's the titan we need in defence. The Olaf Melberg or Martin Larsson, so to speak, we've been crying out for in these recent years. But sadly, it hasn't to be for him. But as a third choice, when he has had to come into the game, he hasn't been too bad. I know against Brighton last game of the season, nearly had a mare. But other than that, I thought when he has come off the bench, he's done okay.
I'm just disappointed with him because obviously he's played in the Premier League the season before the one that's just ended. He's led a team to promotion. I just expected more of him, and it hasn't happened. I mean, he could turn around and say, well, I haven't played enough, and that would probably be fair. But when he did play in the first half of the season, or when Baker was missing through injury for that spell before Christmas, the defence did not look the same, and I don't think that was a coincidence. Unfortunately, maybe he's one of those players that needs a run of games, and towards the end of the season or towards Christmas, Christmas onwards, it didn't happen for him. So he'll have his reasons in his mind, I'm sure. It's probably somewhere in the middle, but I don't think he'll be here next season.
Start off with James Chester, Dan. What a signing he has been for us.
Way too good for the Championship. He's a Rolls Royce at centre half. He can pass, he can tackle, he's always in the right place. He never lacks composure. He's just so reliable, and he's become my favourite player this season. I really like him, and I think he's the perfect captain for us because he gets on with his jobs. Not all captains are vocal players. I don't think he's particularly vocal, but there's other players on the pitch like Jedinak who can do that job. I just think Chester gets it, and he gets Aston Villa, and I'm so pleased that we've got him. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's probably one of the best centre-halves in the Championship, if not the best.
Yeah, I think that really, as I touched on, player of the season for me, you could quite well argue all day long. He's been the most consistent we've had this season, and he hasn't missed a game where he could possibly play as well. And that says a lot for me. I think it speaks louder than anything. And I think, as we'll touch on very shortly, Nathan Baker, he's done him a huge favour, and that they cover each other's weaknesses quite well.
Yeah, they do what the other one can't do. Obviously, Baker's a beast. He wins all the aerial battles. He's body on the line, whereas Chester's a bit more composed. As I say, he gets himself in the right position. No fuss. They're a good centre-half partnership. I do think we will sign another centre-half that perhaps will relegate Baker to third choice, perhaps harshly as well. But you do need a squad, and I think those Baker and Chester, an amazing partnership this season for us. That's been one thing that's gone really, really well for us this season.
Yeah, I didn't expect our defence to be so solid, especially when I saw Nathan Baker was going to be playing for us a bit more, because before he left for that season on loan at Bristol City, he was miles down the pecking order and below Kieran Clark by some distance, I'd argue. But that year in the Championship for Bristol City has done him the world of good, and this season he's been someone else.
Defenders get better with age, so you'd expect him now to be hitting his peak. He's 26, so he's coming up to his peak years. He knows the Championship. He's played a lot of Premier League games as well. He's someone I've always actually had a soft spot for, and I do remember saying at the start of the season when we did the Baker and Clark video that I fancied Baker to have a good season and be important for us. So I'm pleased that I was obviously correct about something this season, because I'm not often right. He's another reliable one. He makes the occasional clanger. Obviously he got sent off for God knows what on the last game of the season, but he can hold his head up high this season because he hasn't really let us down, and that's why we put him in the top 4 players of the season for Villa. I think Bruce somewhat stumbled on the partnership with Elphick's injuries, but sometimes these things are just meant to be, and I think Baker has had a fantastic season, really coming of age season for him.
People forget that despite his age, many would still class him as a young defender, and this season he has really transformed himself, and I must say those two, it's been a fantastic partnership, and I think it can only get better between those two. Dan, Micah Richards this season, bench warmer.
If that. Treatment table warmer.
For me, there's not much to say about him. 50 grand a week for what exactly? That's a bit harsh, but point stands.
It is a bit harsh because I'm sure he didn't want to spend the season injured. And I think at the start of the season, when he was fit, he wasn't getting games. He didn't complain. He didn't disrupt the dressing room. And I hear that he's actually a very important part of the dressing room. And I didn't think he deserved some of the stick he got the season before. I don't think he was one of the bad guys. He may not have always played well, but I don't think he was one of the villains in that relegation season. I think had it not been for injury, he'd have had more game time, because Bruce obviously came in his first game and started him at right back. So Bruce obviously was a fan and wanted to see what he could do, but I just think his body's letting him down now. When you do see him on the bench, he doesn't look the fittest. I'm trying to be kind here. He doesn't look the fittest, to be honest, but then he's barely played any football over the last year. I think that the telltale sign for him was that game that you mentioned earlier when Jedinak ended up dropping to centre-back when Baker got injured. That said a lot about what the future holds for Elphick and Richards, I think. And he may end up staying, because I'm not sure anyone will pay him what he's on at Villa, and that may not be a bad thing around the dressing room, but I just don't see where the future at Villa lies for him in the defence. I don't see where he'd play.
Another guy, Jaws Akore, the less said about him, the better, I'd say. That horror game where he scored the own goal versus Luton Town, dearie me.
There's been a lot of lows as a Villa fan over the last few years, but when he stuck that ball in the bottom corner, I do not know what he was thinking. I've got to admit, I felt absolutely horrific about Aston Villa Football Club at that point. Fresh off the back of the season before, and then losing to Luton and seeing a player put the ball in his own net like that, I just thought, just when you think things can't get worse. I mean, things have picked up slightly since then, thankfully, but God knows what he was thinking in that game. And he was quickly ushered out the door after that game as well, Akore. Essentially, we lost Akore and everything we bought in Chester at the same time, so losing Akore for Chester, I can take that.
Huge upgrade. Left backs now, Dan. Ali Sissoko is the one we'll start off with. Started the season with us as the first choice left back, ended the season on loan at Olympiacos.
Didn't do too much wrong, a reasonably solid left back. I think he started the season well, and then I think we had a video where Reece came on and me and Reece were talking about him, defended him, saying he was a good player, and then he promptly gave away 2 penalties in the next 2 games, and Amavi came in. I don't think he's ever done too much wrong, Sissoko, for Villa. I think he is what he is. He's never going to be the best going forward, although he did get an assist in our first home game against Rotherham with a nice cross for Gusted. As a backup left back, I don't think you get much better in the Championship, and if we do let Amavi go, I'd be quite happy to see Sissoko compete with Taylor, because I don't think you could ask for a much more reliable second left back in the Championship. He's more than good enough for the Championship, in my opinion.
I think that's a fair assessment of him, to be honest. I think you hit nail on the head there with him. Solid. I thought that he was good for us when he played. I think it was about 12 games, I want to say, this season. Didn't play much when Amavi became fit again, and ever since he's been on loan at Olympiacos. So yeah, for me, could well come back into plans somewhere along the lines, but it all depends on Jordan Amavi, which is where we'll move now.
I don't think he'll be here next season. Appreciate the fact that he stuck around when he probably didn't have to, out of loyalty to the club, for seeing him through his injury, but he had a brief spell when he came, when I spoke about Sissoko going out of the team. He had a brief spell before Christmas where he looked like he was coming back to his best form, and then around, I think it was the Burton game and the Leeds game, he just seemed to hit the wall and never really recover from that. And then he's played some games left wing, and we thought, right, maybe this could be his long-term position. He's got good feet, he's quick, but he just never really showed it. I think there is a good player there. I just don't think we're going to see it at Aston Villa, unfortunately. And I think he's someone that we will use to raise funds if we do need to raise funds. But a more down season than up for Amavi, unfortunately. And I really did think he was going to prove a point this season and show what a good player he was. He should have been too good for the Championship, yet I don't think he was.
I'm disappointed in him, to be honest, in the way his season's gone. We always knew that it would take more time for him to get back up to speed, obviously, after that horrific injury that left him out for nearly a year or so. So we always expected him to be slow starting, but he had the upward curve just before Christmas, as you touched on. I think it was against QPR. He put in some wicked balls when we went away from home. Then thereafter, it's just been a downward spiral, conspiring in games where he's just been non-existent and caused massive errors, like against Fulham, for example, away from home, caused a few mistakes there. In other games as well, he's made a helpless amount of mistakes. And then obviously the whole transfer rumour as well, suggesting that there was a bid from China for €25 million, probably didn't help the situation either.
He's a France under-21 international, and France are bringing through some incredible players at the moment and have done for a number of years, the last 4 or 5 years and for him to be part of a good under-21 side. It's one of them ones where maybe perhaps like a Corey, you look back at them getting a big injury and you think, if only that hadn't have happened, what would have happened? And to be fair to him as well, he didn't really have a pre-season. He didn't play in any of our pre-season friendlies, so he came straight into the match day 18 in the first game and stayed there for the rest of the season without having a pre-season. So if I'm being kind to him, perhaps that's a contributing factor, but I am underwhelmed with him. But I feel for him as well because I think he's a good guy. I didn't mind if anyone else left as long as these three players stayed, and that was Amavi, Grealish and Ayer. Now one of them's gone and one's probably going to go. So, yeah, bad shout.
Good point to link it into there. You mentioned Jordan Ayew. Swapped him for Neil Taylor, which left all of us quite literally scratching our heads going, why? But really, he's been the best signing from January.
Yeah, second half of the season, obviously, when he's come in, he got injured when he first came, I think, and then his first game, I think we lost. Did we lose to Ipswich 1-0? And then Max said, put him in the bin. He didn't have the best game, but I did think put him in the bin was perhaps quite harsh. But from then on, up there with Hutton as our best player for me, he's just solid. You know what you're going to get with him. He never lets you down. He's never out of position. He's not the best going forward, but he's certainly no slouch. I've been really impressed with him. I like him. He's got a level head. Like Chester, he's got big game experience, having played with Wales last summer. I just think he's a very good player and someone, again, we're lucky to have because I think he's too good for the Championship.
I rate him highly, and I know Swansea fans said when he left that, he was average, he's this, that and the other. But for me, that was because the player was going stale there and he needed the refresh. And he's got that with Villa. And perhaps that explains his slow start in games like Ipswich, but since then it's all been up for him. And even when that red card for that horrific tackle against Ireland on Seamus Coleman, ever since, he's still at the same player.
Sometimes players need a change. I mean, I think I said it pre-season, Kieran Clark needed a change. I didn't necessarily want him to leave because I quite liked him, but I think he needed a change and he needed to get away from Aston Villa. Same with Mark O'Brien, and they go elsewhere and they look good players. That's what's happened with Taylor. He's left Swansea where he's perhaps gone a bit stale and a bit stagnant, and he's come to Villa and it's refreshed him and he's looked good. I really, really like him, and he's one again that I'm glad we've got going into next season.
So that is all for our review of the defenders this season. If you have enjoyed this show, then please do drop us that like below, commenting your thoughts on the defenders this season, and subscribe to The Villa View, your post notifications on if you are new to the channel.
If you enjoyed that video, why not watch another? Click the video choices on screen now to go and watch them in full. Be sure to subscribe to the channel by clicking our logo there on the left. Easy peasy.